The fog came in without a sound. No wind, no shift in temperature, just a slow, white wall that swallowed the tree line one branch at a time. I was standing near the old trail overlook, just above the ridge where the Smokies stretch endlessly into gray. I'd been there dozens of times before, never once felt uneasy. But that morning, something about the silence felt wrong. The birds had stopped. Even the air felt heavy, like the mist itself was pressing down, filling every space between the trees. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, a dragging sound, like something large sliding across wet ground. I thought maybe it was runoff from the ridge above, but it didn't fade. It got closer. I tried to peer through the haze, but the fog wasn't natural. My flashlight beam just vanished into it, like shining into milk. It should have lit up the brush 5 feet ahead, but instead, it was like the light was being swallowed. The dragging turned to footsteps, slow, uneven, each one closer than the last. I remember holding my breath, waiting for a shape to form, a bear, a person, anything that made sense. But all I saw was movement, the mist itself shifting, rolling against the slope like it was alive, forming something that tried to stand. And then, through that white curtain, I caught a glimpse, not of eyes, not of a face, but the outline of something upright, tall enough that its head brushed the lower branches. It didn't walk. It flowed. I took one step back, and that's when it turned. The entire fog seemed to bend with it, as if the air itself was responding to whatever was inside. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't hearing footsteps at all. I was hearing it breathe. I don't remember running. I just remember the sound fading, the fog pulling back like a tide, and realizing there were no footprints, not even mine. That was the last clear day before the reports started coming in. Rangers, hikers, campers, all talking about the same thing, the fog that moves on its own. The Great Smoky Mountains, 522,000 acres of dense forest, ridgelines that vanish into clouds, and valleys so deep sunlight barely reaches the floor. They call it the Smokies because of what looks like smoke rising from the trees. But it's not smoke, it's mist. Science explains it easily enough. The region's thick vegetation releases water vapor that clings to the cooler mountain air, creating what meteorologists call temperature inversion layers. That's what gives these hills their famous ghostly haze, a natural phenomenon that, by all accounts, should be harmless. But locals here don't always agree with that explanation. In the smaller towns scattered around the park's edges, places like Townsend, Bryson City, and Cosby, stories go back generations. People say the mist isn't just weather. They say it chooses when to appear, where to linger, and who gets to walk out of it. Park rangers will tell you that on any given year, over 1,000 people vanish inside U.S. national parks. Most are found: hikers lost off trail, climbers injured, campers who wandered too far. But a fraction of those cases, particularly in the Smokies, have no logical explanation. Tracks that stop mid-path, campsites where fires are still burning, gear untouched, and not a single sign of struggle. It's easy to dismiss those as legends until you start reading the official reports. Take, for example, October 1996. A pair of experienced hikers, John Merrill and David Owens, vanished near Klingman's Dome. Their last radio contact mentioned low visibility and dense fog rolling through. Search crews found no bodies, just their packs, and a voice recording from Merrill's handheld camcorder. The footage was blurred by moisture, but his final words were clear enough. "It's moving with the fog." Since then, sightings and disappearances have followed a pattern, all tied to sudden, unexplained fog banks that form without the right weather conditions. The Park Service blames geography. Locals, however, blame something older, something that's been here long before the national park was established. Some Cherokee elders still warn about it in hushed tones. Stories of a presence that roams when the air grows still, when the mist hides the stars. They say it's not meant to be seen, and those who do don't return quite the same. Our story tonight follows one of those encounters, a first-hand account from a man who knew these trails better than most, until one morning he stepped into a fog that didn't belong there and found that it was already watching him. My name isn't what matters. I've lived near these mountains most of my life, long enough to know how unpredictable they can be. I grew up in a small Tennessee town about 20 minutes from the park boundary, and I've worked with the Forestry Service on and off since I was 19. I've seen bears up close, helped clear fallen trails after storms, and once hiked 40 miles in a single day to track down a lost kid who'd gone missing near chimney tops. So, when people talk about the Smokies like they're haunted, I usually laugh. Until that morning. It was late October, the season when the air gets sharp and the leaves burn red before the first frost. I'd taken a few days off to check a side trail that had been blocked for months after rock slides. The Park Service called it Section 47B. Nothing remarkable, just one of those paths that twists around the ridgeline before dropping into a hollow near an old overlook. The hike was supposed to take half a day. I brought enough gear to stay overnight, just in case. The plan was simple: survey the fallen area, take some photos, mark hazards for cleanup. It was quiet that morning. Too quiet. Normally, the Smokies wake up with sound. You hear squirrels, the creek, distant birds. But that day, everything felt muted, like someone had turned the volume down on the forest. I remember stopping near the trailhead and checking my radio. Static. No signal. I didn't think much of it. That's normal in certain valleys. But when I looked up, I noticed something odd. A thin layer of mist already pooling along the lower slope. It wasn't even 8 in the morning, and the air was warm. Fog shouldn't have been there yet. Still, I started hiking. The first few miles were routine. Damp ground, fresh bear scat, nothing unusual. But the deeper I went, the stranger it got. The air grew heavier, almost humid, though the temperature hadn't changed. Around mile 3, I saw something I can't explain. A path, narrow, covered in leaves, splitting off to the right. It wasn't on my map. The forestry records didn't show any alternate routes in that section. But there it was, a trail, faint but there, like something had recently cleared the brush. Curiosity got the better of me. I marked my location and stepped in. The canopy closed overhead almost immediately, and the light changed, dimmer, cooler, like stepping into a different time of day. The fog thickened faster than I'd ever seen, rolling downhill in slow waves. And that's when I realized how quiet it had become. Not just quiet, hollow. No wind, no water running, no birds, just my breathing. It's hard to explain that kind of silence. It's not peaceful, it's heavy, like the world's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I kept walking, trying to shake the unease, convincing myself it was just the weather. But deep down I felt it. That sense you get when you're being watched, even though there's nothing there. That feeling followed me until I reached the overlook, or what was left of it. The old railing had collapsed long ago, and the wooden deck was slick with moss. From there, you could usually see all the way to Fontana Lake. But that day, there was nothing. Just a gray ocean of fog stretching as far as I could see. That's when the forest stopped feeling familiar. The overlook was completely swallowed by fog. It moved in slow pulses, not drifting like normal mist, but folding, like something underneath was shifting it from below. I stood there for a minute, watching the vapor roll over the ridge. It looked almost alive, the way it thinned, then thickened again, as if reacting to movement I couldn't see. I remember thinking maybe a storm was forming somewhere down in the valley, but the air was still, not a hint of wind. My radio crackled faintly, then went dead again. No static, no feedback, just silence. That's when I noticed something strange. The forest floor was damp, as if it had just rained, but the leaves weren't wet. They were soft, pliable, almost spongy. And when I stepped forward, they didn't crunch, they just sank slightly, like walking over soil that wasn't entirely solid. I bent down to check, half expecting to find standing water, but the ground was dry beneath the top layer. It made no sense. That's when I started hearing it. A faint tapping off to the left, rhythmic, like wood against wood. At first I thought it might have been a woodpecker, but the pattern didn't fit. It was too slow, deliberate. 3 taps, then silence. I called out, thinking maybe it was another hiker further down the slope. My voice didn't echo, it just disappeared into the fog. The tapping stopped. I waited, scanning the tree line, trying to make out shapes. Nothing, just the endless gray curtain. And then a few seconds later, 3 more taps, only this time closer. I started to feel it then, that pulse in the chest that doesn't come from fear yet, just instinct. Like every nerve suddenly knows something your brain hasn't caught up to. I told myself it could have been water dripping onto hollow wood, but deep down I didn't believe it. The fog pressed tighter, wrapping around the trees until the trunks seemed to blur into silhouettes. The path behind me was gone. I tried to use my compass. It spun once, twice, then froze, pointing north, even though I knew I was facing east. I took a step back and heard a different sound this time, not tapping. Dragging. Long, slow drags across the forest floor, like something heavy was being pulled. I turned my flashlight on again, but the beam barely reached a few feet. The light didn't fade naturally, it just ended, as if the air was swallowing it whole. And then, the silence broke. Somewhere deep in that gray wall, something exhaled. Not like an animal. Not like wind. It was drawn out, uneven, the sound of something too large to hide in that fog, taking one slow breath after another. I froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. I couldn't see the path, couldn't even see my own boots clearly. The only thing I could do was stand still and listen. The dragging started again, closer, circling, as if it was trying to figure out where I was standing. I whispered into my radio, hoping for any signal. The only thing that came through was faint static and something under it. A voice, not words, just a low, distorted whisper, drawn out and broken by interference. Then the static stopped. The forest went completely still again, and for the first time I noticed something I hadn't before. There were no insects, not one. No flies, no distant hum of crickets or cicadas. I've worked these woods for years. Even in heavy fog, you hear life, small, constant, layered sound. But here there was nothing, just that living mist and the faint echo of my own breathing. That was the moment I knew something was off. Not wrong, not dangerous yet, just unnatural. And in a place like the Smokies, that means you're no longer in charge of what happens next. You ever stand in a place so quiet that even your own breathing sounds wrong? That's what the locals say about certain valleys in the Great Smoky Mountains. The ones tourists don't see, the ones not marked on the usual trail maps. Now imagine this. You're deep out there, past the campsites, past where the ranger signs stop showing up. The air starts to feel thicker. A mist creeps in, not the soft morning kind, but a heavy, silvery fog that swallows the tree line whole. You can't see more than 10 feet in front of you. Then you hear it. Not footsteps, not an animal breaking branches. Something moving, slow, deliberate, just beyond that wall of fog. You call out, thinking maybe it's another hiker, but what answers doesn't sound human. A sound rises from inside the mist, like something dragging across the forest floor. Wet, heavy, scraping against roots and stone. The forest goes dead quiet. Even the insects stop. You can't tell if it's getting closer or circling you. All you know is that every direction looks the same. White mist and black trees fading into it. And then, just for a second, you see it move. A shape in the fog, tall and wrong. Too still for an animal, too large for a man. It bends, not walks, bends forward, as if watching you from inside the haze. You blink, and it's gone. That was the first sighting, at least the first one anyone lived to talk about. But as you'll see, that wasn't the last time something moved in that mist. The Great Smoky Mountains are the most visited national park in the United States. Over 12 million people come here every year. They come for the misty ridges, the endless forest, and that strange, ancient beauty that seems to hum in the air. But what most don't realize is that the same mist that gives the Smokies their name has a history, and not the kind they print on travel brochures. See, this mountain range sits between North Carolina and Tennessee, stretching across more than 500,000 acres of old-growth forest. There are more than 1,500 black bears, hundreds of miles of unmarked caves, and entire areas where compasses fail to work. Rangers call them magnetic dead zones. Locals call them something else. Places the fog doesn't lift. Even the name, Smoky, isn't just about the way the fog looks. Native Cherokee stories say the smoke that hangs over the mountains isn't just mist or vapor. It's the breath of something old, something that lives between the trees, hidden in the haze. They called it Shakonage, meaning place of the blue smoke. And they warned travelers never to follow voices in the fog. Now, most people chalk that up to legend, to folklore meant to keep children from wandering too far. But there's a reason the stories never went away. Over the past few decades, hikers, campers, and even seasoned rangers have reported seeing or hearing something moving inside that mist. Something that doesn't quite fit the usual categories of bear, man, or shadow. In the report we're exploring today, the encounter came from Floyd Roger Myers, Jr., an experienced woodsman from Vermont who spent 3 summers maintaining backcountry trails in the Smokies. His story begins like most others. Quiet mornings, solitude, nature at its finest. But it ends with a night that changed the way he looked at the forest forever. Faint sound of wind through trees, fading into ambient mountain sounds. Before we get into Floyd's experience, let's take a closer look at the region itself, the areas most reports seem to come from, and the strange environmental patterns that make this park different from anywhere else in the US. Because once you understand the land, you'll understand why the mist hides things that shouldn't move. If you've ever driven through the Great Smoky Mountains at dawn, you've seen it. That rolling mist that sits low, hugging the valleys and creeping up the pines like smoke from an invisible fire. That mist isn't just pretty. It's a strange kind of natural phenomenon. The park is home to over 90 inches of rainfall a year, one of the highest in North America, and the forests here breathe out so much moisture that it literally forms its own weather system. Scientists call it a temperate rainforest, but locals have a simpler term: the breathing woods. Now, what makes this part of the Appalachians so different isn't just the fog. It's how unpredictable it is. Temperature drops happen fast. A 20-degree shift in less than an hour isn't rare. The fog thickens, visibility collapses, and sound behaves differently. Voices echo in directions they shouldn't. A branch snapping 50 feet away can sound like it's right beside you. There's another thing, and this is something rangers talk about quietly. The valleys distort compass readings. The Smokies sit on a complex web of iron-rich rock, quartz deposits, and magnetic minerals. In some pockets, your compass needle will spin like it's lost its mind. Combine that with fog so dense you can't see your own hand, and you start to understand how people vanish out here without leaving a trace. Even wildlife acts differently in these conditions. Black bears, normally skittish around humans, have been seen pacing in circles in the fog, disoriented, as if tracking something they can't see, but can sense. There are even documented reports from the National Park Service itself of hikers hearing chorus-like sounds at night. No clear source, no echoes, just a low, harmonic vibration carried through the mist. It's these same conditions, the fog, the minerals, the distorted sound, that seem to show up in nearly every encounter report, from the 1970s all the way to now. That's why when Floyd Myers described what happened that night, the details lined up with dozens of other unexplained sightings, all clustered in the same elevation range near Klingman's Dome, where the fog tends to stay longer and thicker than anywhere else. So, what was it that Floyd saw? Was it an animal? A trick of the weather? Or something older? Something the Cherokee might have been warning about all along? Whatever it was, it moved in the mist like it belonged there. Floyd Roger Myers Jr. wasn't the kind of man who spooked easily. 54 years old, born and raised in the backwoods of Vermont, he'd spent most of his life working timber and maintaining hiking trails for the National Forest Service. The kind of man who could read a tree line better than a map and who trusted his instincts more than a GPS. In 2019, he took a seasonal position helping restore an overgrown section of trail near Forney Ridge, a lesser-known route that cut deep into the western Smokies. It was the kind of work he liked, solitary, quiet, surrounded by nothing but forest and fog. He'd camp out for 3 days at a time, check in by radio once every morning, and hike the ridgeline clearing fallen branches and rock slides. People who knew Floyd said he didn't talk much, but when he did, his stories always had detail. He remembered the shape of a footprint, the sound of wind in different kinds of pine, the way fog changed color when the sun hit it through the canopy. And that's what makes his account so hard to dismiss. Because according to his own notes, and the recorded statement he gave a park officer after the incident, he wasn't tired, he wasn't lost, and he wasn't imagining things. It was his third day on the ridge, mid-July. He'd camped near a creek, close to the tree line where the fog usually gathered around dusk. He'd spent most of the day clearing trail markers, and as the sun started to drop, he wrote in his journal, "Mist moving in early. Feels heavier tonight. Birds gone quiet before dark." Now, this wasn't unusual. Fog often settles faster in the valleys, but what Floyd noticed next was. He said the mist wasn't drifting down the slope like it normally does. It was coming up, rising against the wind. He thought maybe it was a temperature inversion, that odd weather shift where cold air traps warm air and causes strange patterns. But then he heard something, a sound he later described as cloth dragging over wet leaves. Slow, steady, deliberate. Not wind, not rain. Something moving. He turned toward it, flashlight on low beam, scanning through the fog. Nothing. Just gray shapes of trees and white mist twisting around them. Then came the smell. Earthy, metallic, like wet iron. He said it reminded him of blood mixed with soil. He called out, thinking maybe a black bear had wandered close, or maybe one of the other maintenance crew had come up the ridge early. But no one answered. The sound just stopped. For a long time, everything was silent again. Floyd wrote that he went back to his tent, zipped it up, and kept the flashlight on inside. He wasn't panicking, not yet, but he said the woods felt wrong, like something was watching from just beyond the reach of his light. And when he finally lay down, that's when he noticed the shadow outside. A tall, still outline pressing faintly against the fog. He didn't move, didn't even breathe loud. He said it stood there for almost a full minute, and then it bent at the waist in a slow, unnatural motion, like it was trying to look under the edge of his tent flap. Then it straightened and vanished back into the mist. That was the first night. The next one would be worse. By the time the second night came, Floyd had convinced himself he was just spooked. He told himself it was fatigue, fog tricks, maybe a bear, something explainable. Men like him don't scare easy, and they definitely don't believe in campfire stories. But that night, something changed. He woke up around 2:40 a.m. No wind, no rain, just that same rolling mist pressing against his tent walls. The air was colder than usual, heavy and damp. He said it felt like breathing through cloth. Then he noticed it again, the silence, not the calm kind, the missing kind. No crickets, no frogs, not even the distant hum of the creek that ran near camp. Just air, still and hollow. He unzipped his tent slowly, just enough to peek out. The fog was thicker now, like a milky curtain that swallowed the trees whole. He shined his flashlight out, low beam, sweeping it in slow arcs. Nothing. Then, halfway through that second sweep, he caught it. A shape, far back between two poplar trees, tall, unmoving. He said it looked like a person standing perfectly still, maybe 20 feet away. But the more he focused, the less human it seemed. The shoulders were too narrow, the arms too long, and it didn't cast a clear shadow in the beam. He tried calling out, "Hey! Who's there?" But the words sounded muffled, like the fog swallowed the sound before it could travel. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, half hidden, like it was waiting for him to blink. Then, it did something he could never explain. It leaned, slow and deliberate, not stepping, not shifting, just bending sideways, the way a tree might when the wind pulls it. Only there was no wind. And when it leaned, Floyd heard it again, that dragging sound, like wet cloth sliding through leaves. Only this time it was closer. He backed up, zipped the tent, and grabbed the flare he always kept by his sleeping bag. He didn't light it, not yet, but just held it, like something solid between him and whatever was outside. He said he sat there for what felt like hours, listening. Every now and then, he'd hear something soft brushing the outside of the tent. Sometimes from one side, sometimes from the other. Then, around 4 a.m., the smell returned. That metallic scent, stronger now. And mixed with it, another odor, like something rotting in the rain. He said he couldn't take it anymore. He pulled the flare cord. The red light flooded the inside of the tent, bleeding through the fabric like a pulse. Outside, he could see movement. Not running, not fleeing, but pulling back, slow, like the light bothered it. He heard one final sound before everything went quiet. A deep, wet inhale, like lungs filling with air after holding it too long. Then, silence. When the sun finally came up, the fog lifted like nothing had happened. No prints, no broken branches, just disturbed soil around his camp, long streaks in the dirt, almost like something had been dragging itself through it. Floyd packed up and left that morning. He hiked out 8 miles without stopping once. When he reached the ranger station, he refused to spend another night in the mountains. He told them, and this was his exact quote, "There's something out there that waits for the fog, and it knows when you're alone." After Floyd's report reached the ranger station, it didn't go through the usual channels. Normally, an incident like that, unidentified presence near a campsite, gets logged as wildlife disturbance or camper misidentification. But the ranger who took his statement, a veteran named Tom Haler, didn't file it under either. Instead, he marked it unclassified, environmental anomaly. Now, that's not a category you'll find on the park's public database. It's something they use internally, a catch-all term for things that don't make sense, but still have to be documented.
Really?
And here's where it gets interesting. When you look back through the park's maintenance archives, specifically the handwritten reports from the 1980s through early 2000s, there are 11 separate entries marked with that same tag. All from roughly the same area, all describing the same conditions. Fog thicker than usual, distorted sound, an unnatural stillness in the forest. And in 5 of those cases, something seen moving within the mist. One entry from 1994, logged by a ranger named D. Carson, reads, "Fog formed around 1800 hours, visibility less than 10 feet. Heard prolonged dragging noise, accompanied by low-tone resonance like a hum. Sound appeared to circle observation point. No animal visual." Another from 2003 describes, "Large, shadowed figure moving uphill against prevailing wind. Shape indistinct, motion steady, not quadruped." And yet, none of these reports ever made it into public ranger briefings. They exist only in carbon copies stored in off-site records. It's not just the rangers either. Locals from Bryson City and Cades Cove tell eerily similar stories. Hikers emerging from the fog, pale and trembling, saying they'd heard something pacing alongside them for over a mile. Farmers finding deer carcasses near the tree line, unbitten, unbloodied, but completely stripped of fur. One retired park guide, Evelyn Morris, who worked tours for nearly 20 years, put it this way: "The Smokies don't scare you loud, they scare you quiet. You think it's fog until you see it breathe." There's even an old Cherokee account, recorded in the late 1800s by ethnographer James Mooney, describing a spirit called Nun Yunu Wi, the stone-clad one. A creature said to walk unseen through fog, only visible when the air is thick enough to hold its outline. The legend says it lures travelers by mimicking the shape of something familiar, a man, a deer, until you're close enough to realize it's neither. Now, whether Floyd saw that, or something else entirely, we can't say, but the details line up too neatly to ignore. The same weather, the same silence, the same dragging sound, and always the fog. Even today, rangers quietly warn new hires never to hike certain ridges alone when the mist rolls in heavy. Not because of bears or cliffs, but because, as one ranger wrote in his private notes, sometimes the mist moves like it's breathing. And if you watch long enough, it starts watching back. When you hear a story like Floyd's, a seasoned outdoorsman claiming something moved inside the fog, the first instinct is to explain it away. And to be fair, science offers several possibilities. Let's start with the most grounded one: environmental illusion. The Great Smoky Mountains are dense with overlapping ridges and steep valleys, and when fog rolls in, it bends light and sound in strange ways. A flashlight beam, for instance, can scatter off the moisture in the air, creating what's called a Mie scattering effect. The same reason car headlights seem to flare in mist. It can make stationary objects appear to shift or breathe. Combine that with the temperature inversions common in July, cold air trapped below warm, and you get distorted acoustics. A single branch snap can sound like a heavy footstep. A creek running downhill can echo upward, mimicking movement. It's entirely possible that Floyd's dragging sound was something mundane, carried and reshaped by atmospheric pressure. That's the logical explanation. But then there's the part that doesn't quite fit: the consistency. Across multiple accounts, over decades, witnesses described not just sound or shadows, but a shape. Tall, human-like, but not human, and always within heavy fog conditions. Some folklorists believe these reports could represent a cultural echo of older Cherokee legends, particularly Nunyunui, the stone-clad one. Descriptions of it always tie back to thick mist or smoke, often as a sign of its presence. It's said to be a being hidden by the breath of the mountains, moving unseen except when it wants to be known. Now, Skeptics argue that's folklore adapting to environment, people shaping myths around natural phenomena. But here's where the lines blur. When investigators analyzed the topographical data from the ridges where sightings were most common, they found something unusual. Those areas, especially near Klingman's Dome and Forney Ridge, register electromagnetic fluctuations higher than surrounding zones. The quartz and magnetite in the bedrock are dense enough to interfere with compasses, and in rare cases, cause mild disorientation or hallucination in sensitive individuals. Could that explain why multiple people see the same kind of figure? Possibly. But the odds of so many witnesses, rangers, hikers, locals, describing nearly identical shapes, movements, and sounds over 50 years, that's harder to write off. There's also the biological theory. Some wildlife biologists suggest that under certain fog conditions, the human brain misinterprets animal silhouettes, especially large bears standing upright, as humanoid. But that doesn't explain the behavior Floyd described, the bending motion, the circling sound, or the eerie silence that preceded it. And then there's the possibility no one likes to say out loud, that something else is in those mountains. Something not cataloged, not seen clearly, but deeply familiar to the land itself. Even the Cherokee, long before the park existed, warned that the fog has eyes. They didn't mean that poetically. So maybe the Smoky Mountains aren't haunted in the way we think. Maybe they're alive, and the mist is how they breathe, how they move, how they hide what isn't meant to be seen. When the search parties ended and the press moved on, Pine Ridge returned to a silence that felt heavier than before. The official statements called it unresolved, but the locals had already decided what it was. They didn't need reports or signatures to tell them the truth. Whatever was out there, it had claimed what it wanted and vanished back into the tree line. In the months that followed, the reservation changed in small, unsettling ways. Trails once open to families were closed off. Entire sections of the forest were marked with crude warning signs, hand-painted in red. Hunters who had spent their lives tracking game along the ridge stopped going out altogether. Some moved away, leaving behind houses with doors still bolted and windows covered. By the next winter, the stories started to thin out, not because people forgot, but because they refused to talk about it anymore. Even those who had once spoken freely began to avoid the topic. The few who remained said it wasn't safe to speak its name. They claimed words could draw it back, that to recall what had happened was to invite attention. And yet, small things kept surfacing. A park worker found claw marks carved into a utility shed 30 miles from the original site. Deep, deliberate, and too far apart to belong to any known animal. A rancher reported hearing what he described as a person breathing outside his barn, though he was miles from the nearest home. And one night, a police radio caught a transmission no one could trace. A single voice whispering coordinates that led to nowhere. Today, the area around Pine Ridge remains mostly untouched. The forest has reclaimed what was left behind, swallowing up the evidence, the memories, and maybe the truth itself. The few who remember say the woods feel different now. Not haunted, exactly, but aware. Like something still listens. Like it's waiting for a reason to return. And when newcomers ask what really happened that summer, the locals just shake their heads and tell them the same thing every elder has said for generations. We don't talk about it publicly. Because around Pine Ridge, silence isn't denial. It's protection. Some stories don't end, they just stop being told. And in places like Pine Ridge, the line between folklore and memory has faded so completely that even the truth feels like a rumor. The older residents say the land remembers everything, that the wind carries whispers of the past, and that the silence after sundown isn't emptiness, it's awareness. Maybe that's why people still lower their voices when they speak of that night. Maybe that's why no one rebuilds near the ridge, no matter how much time has passed. Because those who live close to the woods know, once something watches you from the tree line, You never truly stop feeling its eyes. Outsiders might call it superstition. Locals call it survival. And every now and then, when the fog settles low and the coyotes go silent all at once, those who remember what was lost out there still turn toward the tree line. Not to look, but to listen. Because they say if you listen long enough, you can still hear it breathing. This has been another true encounter, a reminder that some legends are born from silence, and some silences are earned.